Everyone. My name is Merle Massey. I'm the coordinator for undergraduate research here at the University of Saskatchewan. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our presentation comes from Rebekah Bennetch, who is in the Ron and Jane Graham School of Professional Development over in the College of Engineering. But Rebekah is a specialist in communication of all kinds, and today she is giving us some overview and guidance and some practice on how to do effective oral communication. And Rebekah, thank you so much for joining us today.
For sure. Thanks, Merle. So, hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me join you today. And thanks for making some time in your schedule, whether you are joining us in real time or if you're watching us recorded. So, I'm going to share screens with you and share some slides. I've got some activities planned for today. So, if you're joining us in real time, I'm hoping that you can participate with some of these activities. And if you're joining us at home, maybe you can just pause the video as you're going along and participate, because the more that you actively engage with the material, I think the more you're going to enjoy this talk and the more you're going to get out of it. So let's get started. Let's go to Chrome, I believe. Wait, I've got to find my right screen here. Just give me 1 second to find my right screen. So Merle, do you see my screen? Is this right? Are you seeing my screen?
I do. It's still gray for me, but that's my rural internet. It's coming.
Okay. Hopefully that will load up okay. So as Merle mentioned, my name is Rebekah, and I work over at the Ron and Jane Graham School of Professional Development in the College of Engineering. So I teach communication over there, and I teach public speaking to engineers and agriculture students. And so some of you may have taken some of my classes. I'm trying to see if I recognize any of y'all's names, but I don't. But I love my job. I love to teach what I teach. Merle, do you see what you see?
I'm still in my. It's still all gray. Yeah, I'm with Eileen.
Still
All I see
gray.
is gray. So let's try.
Oh. Let me see. It's been a while since I've shared. Let me stop sharing, see if I can share it again. It's been a while since I have shared screens, so let me just make sure that I'm
That's
on
okay.
right.
The first thing about communication is that technical things happen to everybody.
Oh, for sure. We always call them, as a teacher, we call them teaching moments. It's
Yeah,
really, I screwed up, so give me a second. Let's see. How about that?
it's still just gray.
Still just gray, eh? Well, huh. Maybe I will just try share. I have it on Google Slides. So, oh, someone leave a chat.
Yeah, Eileen says the same thing. Nope.
Still, nope. Okay. Or talk today. All right. So as you're filling this out, I want you to, again, think about what to do and what not to do. So I'm going to give you probably about another minute or two to fill this out, and then I'll bring you all back to where we are. I'm just going to check to see what you all are writing here. Oh, I see some good ones. So think about the times that you've been in a class where you've had a really poor teacher, or maybe a really bad wedding speech, or maybe a time you saw a really good TED talk that you really thought was interesting and compelling. All right, I'll give you about another 10 seconds to wrap up your last thoughts. And I'll bring it back, and we'll rewind a little bit and go back to the beginning of the talk. All right, Anonymous Kiwi, I'll let you finish your thought. Don't you just love these names? Anonymous Kiwi, Anonymous Narwhal.
Anonymous gopher. These are great. I love it. I do like some of these. Yeah, using too much jargon. Oh my gosh.
So we're gonna come back to these in just a minute. So I'm gonna go back to my slides just for a second here, and just give you a quick overview of what you can expect today's talk to be like. So what I want to do first of all is I want to kind of give you what I call a rhetorical formula for public speaking. So I teach over in the Ron and Jane Graham School of Professional Development, and we are a humanities center in a technical college. And so I'm going to give you a bit of a technical formula using some humanities ideas that's going to help you plan your next talk and help you to kind of prioritize what you should say and what you maybe should not say whether it's a PowerPoint presentation, a class presentation, or even writing a really complicated email. I'm going to give you some strategies that'll hopefully help you to plan what you need to say going forward. And then I'm going to give you just some general tips on how to give a presentation if you're really nervous, because if you're nervous, I'm here to tell you that is a normal thing to be nervous, but hopefully after today, you're going to have some better ideas of how to tackle some of those fears you may be feeling. So I wanted to initially give you a good overview of what I wanted you to talk about, but we had to do some quick things on the fly. So let's have a quick look at what you all came up with in terms of things that you thought people should stop doing in their presentations. So some of the negatives of presentations. So here, oh, looks like we got some in the chat too. Using words, bridging words, we also call those speech tags. Monotone, having a monotone presentation is not a good thing to have in a presentation. Why is that? Could someone in the chat write out why is it bad to sound monotone when you're giving a presentation? Write it in the chat. Reading and not looking up. We're going to talk about that when it comes to slides. Amy says it's boring. Oh, Merle says it's boring too. It makes you sleepy. Having no energy in your voice translates to having no energy in your presentation. So we're going to talk about having verbal energy. It's hard to stay captivated for sure. Using cliches, talking without emotion, all text, no pictures. We're going to talk about that. Sitting to give a presentation. Ooh, that's interesting. In this new world of remote teaching and learning, we've had to do a lot of sitting for presentations, and it really does change how you relate to an audience when you're sitting and talking to a camera versus sitting and talking to an audience in front of you. How do you adjust as a speaker? We'll talk a little bit about that today. Too long, like way too long. And sometimes as a speaker, sometimes it's not reading the room and not recognizing what you're saying is important. All text, no pictures. What else? Talking into your chest. Interesting. And that probably has to do something with verbal delivery and how you sound vocally. Let's have a quick look at the other side, the green, in terms of things that you want to do in a presentation. Eye contact, projecting your voice, giving more feedback. I wonder if that's for, maybe that's for an audience member, because we're going to talk about how communication is a reciprocal activity. Keeping the attention of the audience, having it not too short, not too long, connecting to the audience, respecting time. That's so important. I'm going to give you some tools that will hopefully help you to learn how to best respect your audience's time. Giving time for a response. What else here? Someone says start using too much jargon. I'm thinking that's probably a stop because I don't think we want to use too much jargon. But all of these are, I wanted you just to start thinking of these examples of things that you want to do and things you don't want to do when it comes to communication, because having those examples in your mind is going to help you hopefully to cement some of the tools I'm going to be giving you going forward. Because public speaking is one of those activities that is inevitable in communication. And so you might as well know how to do it and how to do it well. So let's get started. What does it take to communicate? Well, when we communicate, I want you to think of communication like a triangle, okay? Sometimes when we think of communication, people think of it like a line. They think of it as, I'm a speaker, I have a message, and it's given to an audience. And so then the only responsibility of the speaker is to get the message out. But if you think of it like a triangle, you're going to see that there's responsibilities of the speaker when I communicate. Not only do I have a responsibility to what I'm saying, to the message, but notice that the triangle is also connected to the audience. So as a speaker, I'm connected to both what I'm saying, but I'm also connected to who I'm communicating to. Notice that the message, what's being said, is connected to the person who's speaking, but it's also connected to people who are hearing the message. And likewise, the audience is connected to what's being said, but also to who's communicating. So when you start to understand communication like a triangle, you start to understand that communication can be pretty complicated. It's not as simple as just getting your words out there, getting your facts and your data out there. As a speaker, it's not just the content, but it's also the relationship I have with the people who are receiving my message. So even if you have the world's most complicated technical information to convey to your audience, it's still your responsibility to find a way to make sure that you're connecting to the people who are receiving your audience. And that's why I like some of the comments that you all wrote on the stop and start exercise we just did. Someone wrote about how you don't want to waste your audience's time, making sure that you're not too long or too short. Well, when you understand communication like this triangle, you understand that each of these parts of your message, whether it's you, the speaker, the people hearing your message, or the message that they're receiving, they're all connected, and they're all connected in important ways. And when you ignore one of those connections, when you ignore one of those relationships, then you're not going to be as effective as a speaker. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit now about some specific rhetorical strategies. And so what I would recommend you doing is to just do some jot notes here, because I'm going to actually have you apply this information right away. We're going to do a quick activity. So you might want to do some jot notes so you can remember what these words mean, because these words are going to sound foreign to you at first, because these words are Greek. And we're going to look way back in time, back to Aristotle. And Aristotle was a Greek philosopher, and he started thinking about communication. And he actually was the one who came up with this rhetorical triangle formulation. And he took it a step further, and he started to understand communication by understanding what he broke down as the modes of appeal. Now, what a mode just means a tool. So think of these as 3 tools you could have in your toolbox as a professional. These are 3 tools for your argument, and you need to have some part of all 3 of these tools in order for your argument to be successful. So he labeled each part of this argument using a Greek word. And so we're going to look at the Greek word, and we're going to look at each of the parts of the argument that the word corresponds to. Now, what's great about this is we can look at the Greek word and we can see roots of that word in English words that we use now. So the very first word we'll look at is what Aristotle called logos. So looking at the word logos, and specifically the first 3 letters of the word logos, what English word do you think, you guess, he's referring to in terms of arguments? L-O-G, and don't say log. I don't mean like a stick of wood. L-O-G, what English word? Brienne says logic. Exactly, logic. And so when Aristotle talks about the logos of your argument, he is in part talking about the logic of what you have to say. But he's not just talking about the logic, he's talking about the format of how you set up your logic. He's talking about the evidence that you use. He's talking about not just how you see the evidence, but how your audience sees the evidence. Is it interesting? Is it compelling? Is it something that they're going to find important? Is your purpose clear in your logos? All of these are parts of how you set up what it is you have to say. So later on today, we're going to talk a little bit about PowerPoint. And part of your argument will be the logos of how you set up your slides, making sure that you're able to convey your message in a way that's best understood by your audience. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about the logos of your message. It's the content of how you set up what it is you want to say. It could be the evidence, it's the organization of it, the format of it. Really, it's not just what you say, but how you say what you say. Really important part of your communication. And for all of you in technical professions, that's an easy sell, because you get that, right? This is the content of your log report. This is the content of your experiment, right? But notice that's only one part of your argument. So logos is important, but it's only one part of what you have to say. There's still 2 other parts you have to include in your argument in order for it to be complete. So the second part, Aristotle calls pathos. And this one's a little bit more complicated to see the English word embedded within that word, pathos, P-A-T-H. Oh, Nicholas, on the ball, thank you. Empathy or sympathy, right? Empathy. So someone really quick in the chat, give me a quick 10-second definition of what does it mean if you have empathy for your audience? If I show you empathy, what does that mean? Someone give me the definition in the chat. Ooh, that's fast. Compassion. One word. That's pretty good. Compassion. Relating to their life experiences. Imagining the emotion of others. Stepping in their shoes. Putting yourself in another person's position. You all are awesome. Awesome. Yes, this is exactly it. That's pathos. But how does that relate to your argument? Well, when we talk about the pathos of your argument, we're talking about how do you connect? How do you connect as a speaker to the people who are listening to you, what it is you have to say? And you always have to think about how do I take my message and make it audience centered? Okay, because it's not so much what I have to say, it's what does my audience need to hear? What are they interested in hearing? What are they going to find important about what I have to say? How do I connect to their experiences? How do I connect to their emotion? How do I put myself in their shoes? How do I build this common ground? So having that strong pathos part to your argument helps your audience understand the logos. I often like to think of pathos like a vehicle for your logos, right? If you don't have that audience connection, then your audience isn't going to care about your argument. So you really have to find those meaningful ways to connect. And again, even if it's a technical argument, you can find ways to work in emotion. And I don't mean emotion as in making your audience cry, right? I mean emotion in terms of showing passion, enthusiasm, confidence, right? All of these are emotions that are intangible, but add so much in terms of that nonverbal quality to your argument. So you have to find pathos in your presentation. We're going to talk about ways to connect to your audience. But if you ignore that pathos connection, then I guarantee you, you're not going to be as successful as a communicator. It doesn't matter how great your facts are. If your audience isn't feeling connected to you and to your argument, they're not going to hear your facts. So do not ignore these pathos qualities. Pathos is really important. And we're going to talk about what to do and what not to do when it comes to pathos in just a moment. Okay. So we've got the logos, we've got what you're saying and how you say it. We've got your pathos, how you connect, build that empathy connection in terms of really making sure your audience understands I'm talking to you specifically, making it audience centered. Last but not least, we've got ethos. ETH. Pop quiz. What English word do you think corresponds to those first three letters? ETH. Ethics. Thanks, Odette. Ethics. Ethics. Thanks, Brianne. Ethics. And so when we talk about the ethos of your argument, we are talking about the ethics. We're talking specifically about the credibility of your argument, what it is you have to say. Can I trust you? Can I trust you? Are you using credible sources? Or have you done the amount of preparation to make sure that you are prepared to present what it is you have to say? Are you showing goodwill, good character, good judgment, and how are you relating to us? Oh, Merle, I think we've got a technical difficulty in the chat, so I'll let you check that out in the chat.
I'll work on that.
Thank you. So making sure that you connect to your audience, not only in terms of their emotions, but also that you hold on to that level of trust, because you can imagine having that ethos as a foundation is so important to your communication. Because if I question your facts and findings, then I'm going to question how you connect to me. So having that ethos is so important in making sure that your audience understands that you are a good, reliable person, that that you are worthy to be heard. Also understanding that ethos represents not just your credibility, but the credibility of who you represent. So for example, today I represent not just Rebekah Bennetch myself, but I represent my department, I represent the University of Saskatchewan, I represent a faculty member at the U of S. As a U of S student, you have a certain ethos that you automatically carry just as a member of being a member of our community, okay? So just a quick review then of what it is. The goals of your presentation is to find a balance of all three of these elements. You first need to find a way to take that information, that logos, and communicate in a way that's clear and understood by your audience. And so, like I said, the second half of this presentation, we'll talk more about some specifics about PowerPoint and how you can really work in some good logo strategies there. But understand that also part of logos is how choosing what you decide to include on your slides is a big part of your logos appeals as well. Also included in your presentation is how you connect to your audience. Okay, so having that strong pathos appeal is really also important as well. And then how you establish your credibility will be important to make sure that your audience can trust what it is you have to communicate. Okay, so that, my friends, was a quick crash course in what I teach usually day to day in the College of Engineering. But I wanted to give you that quick crash course because what we're going to do next is I'm going to show you a video. And this is one of my favorite videos. This is really, truly a gem because this video shows you so much of what not to do when it comes to a PowerPoint presentation. So what I want you to do now is I want you to jot down as you watch this video, and it's only about 3 minutes long or so. I want you to jot down what are some of the rhetorical mistakes that this speaker makes as he's giving his presentation. Okay, so what mistakes in terms of the logos? So in terms of how he's communicating his information, what mistakes does he make in terms of how he set up his slides, in terms of how he's delivering his message? In terms of his pathos, how does he connect to his audience? What are the mistakes he makes there? Are there things that he could have done differently? And then finally, how does he establish his credibility? What are the mistakes he makes in terms of how he comes across to his audience? Okay. All right, I'm going to stop sharing just for a second because I'm going to share again, and I need to share with my audio. So I'm going to share this again, and hopefully this works. Oops, hold on one second. I didn't do it right. I'm going to share one more time with my.
This happened more than once with me, so.
Yes, I just want to make sure the audio works. So, okay. I'm going to try this, Merle. Can you let me know that if this works, Merle? Hopefully it works.
Sure, I sure will.
Thank you.
I can hear it great.
Quadruple checking notes as people file in. Getting the computer. Quadruple checking notes as people file in. Getting the computer ready. And asking everyone to take a seat. Pretending to click something on the computer to cover up the fact that I don't know what to do with myself.
Arriving just in time.
Wrapping up our conversation about a popular TV show we watched last night.
Disdain for popular TV show.
Mediocre icebreaker joke that doesn't quite land. Attempt to redeem myself by making fun of that guy.
Laughing at that guy.
Laughing because he's laughing and I like him.
Not laughing, and now checking out for the rest of the session.
Title, dramatic pause of my presentation.
Question about how long this session will last?
Annoyed, vague response.
Exaggerated eye roll.
Poignant quote from unknown philosopher to kick off presentation in dramatic fashion. Juvenile slide transition to spice things up. Reading a long paragraph exactly as it appears on the PowerPoint slide about a shocking statistic I just learned about, followed by all kinds of vague lingo that no one will remember 2 seconds from now, capped off by 3 bullet points. Proudly pause to make sure everyone notices my awesome clip art choice. Out of date pop culture reference.
Correction about pop culture reference.
Defending pop culture reference by citing social networking site no one uses.
Audible sigh to make sure everyone knows this is a complete waste of my time.
Serious and somewhat over-the-top reminder about how important this information is. Unexpected technical difficulty. Embarrassed people can see my desktop background.
Snide remark about how Macs are better than PCs.
Desperate plea for IT guy.
Fixing the problem with an annoyed look on my face so that everyone knows how good at computers I am.
Unfunny video I'm really proud of having created myself.
Texting my friend in a way that I think is discreet.
Clearly aware of the texting. Prefacing a preface of a preface so that no one really understands the point that I'm prefacing. And now, going through a long list of facts, one by one by one. Asking if anyone has any questions. Reminding everyone there are no bad questions. Hoping if I wait long enough, someone will finally have a question. Concluding by restating the title of my presentation and dismissing everyone. excited that someone came back for a follow-up conversation.
Grabbing pen that I accidentally left.
All right. So I love the sad music at the end the best. Oh, all right. So let's look into the chat. I saw lots of y'all writing in the chat. Let's see. Some of the things that you all wrote. Merle, picking on someone in the audience. All right, so what is that? That's it. Let's start there. Picking on someone in the audience. And so what was that a mistake of? How was what was he doing there? What was he not, what was he ignoring? What are the modes of appeal? Ethos, pathos, logos. Look back at your notes. When he was picking on someone in the audience, empathy, right? And which of the three? Ethos, pathos, logos, empathy, pathos, right? It was the pathos appeal, right? Because remember, pathos is all about connecting to your audience, right? And so he redirected that bad vibes from himself to what I'm looking at what Thea wrote here. He redirected the bad vibes from himself to somebody else, right? And so he all of a sudden pointed to somebody in the audience and made fun of him, and then all of a sudden everybody laughed. That was not a good laughing, right? They were laughing not with him, but at him. And all of a sudden that broke the connection between him and the audience. And so even though he was making fun of one person in the audience, the entire audience probably felt alienated from the speaker because he felt that sense of shame that he shifted that attention. And that was a mistake of pathos, right? And so now all of a sudden the audience doesn't want to listen to it because now all of a sudden he doesn't want to listen to the speaker. Eileen says, I said empathy because he likely doesn't want to be picked on. Right. Right. So when we see someone else being picked on the audience, we as a whole audience feel bad. Right. I'm going to scroll up and see what else you all said here. Confusing main points. Yeah. Using green text, probably not the best when so many people are colorblind. There are so many mistakes in that slide presentation, right? We could spend probably the rest of this presentation just talking about the number of ways that he screwed up PowerPoint. I remember I once went to a presentation where every single slide transition was different. And by the end, I wanted to wring the person's neck. It was just so annoying. And what happened was it became more about watching the cool tools on PowerPoint than became about listening to what the other person had to say, right? So that would probably be a mistake of logos because the tool that you're using to convey the information with, you're misusing that tool. And so that I'm paying more attention to the tool than I am the content of what you have to say. And you don't want your audience to do that, right? You don't want your audience to do that. What were some of the mistakes he made with his credibility? So his ethos. Remember, we talked about how your audience has to trust what you have to say. So in addition to making fun of that audience member, which was a mistake of pathos, that was probably also a mistake of ethos. But how else did he lose the trust of his audience? We didn't know the philosopher. Okay, so yeah, he has an unknown philosopher, so not citing sources. That's a problem, right? That's definitely going to make you not trust him. He never set up his credibility except when he yelled at them, right? And then that kind of backfired, didn't it? Because he overstepped for sure. He didn't introduce himself or ground the information. He wasn't prepared. Oh, Eileen, you gave me an excellent bridging point, Eileen. Thank you. He wasn't prepared. And when you don't take the time to prepare, it really underlines so much of what it is and how you come across to your audience. And so the moral of that is to take the time to prepare. And you take the time to prepare by first thinking about your argument. And so let's just go back for a second to, let's go back to this slide right here. Think about your argument and think about how am I going to get that balance to what it is I have to say. So, somebody, did I hear somebody? No? Okay. So you want to have that rhetorical balance. And so you want to make sure you understand what you have to say. So you have that priority of what it is you want to communicate. How am I going to communicate to who's listening to what I have to say? And how am I going to make sure that they can trust what it is that I'm going to be conveying to them? So let's talk a little bit now about PowerPoint specifically. I won't make you watch the video again. So typically, the way PowerPoint is often used is used in three ways. It's used as what I call a slideument, a teleprompter, or it could be used as a presentation. Now, a slideument is not an actual word, which is why I have it in quotes. But what a slideument means is it basically means pretty much putting your entire paper on a slide. So putting huge chunks of text on a slide and basically using PowerPoint as if it was Microsoft Word. And so we've all sat in classes where we've seen these huge chunks of text, and we're going to talk about why you want to avoid that. Sometimes people use it as a teleprompter, and that's one reason why I love that video. Is remember that part of the video where he's going through bit by bit, and each point is like telling him what's coming next, and then all of a sudden he had that forgotten fourth point, and he forgot about it, and he also was surprised when it came across on the screen. Not a good look for his ethos, not a good look for his credibility. But sometimes people use PowerPoint as a way to keep them on track, and that's not what it's meant for, right? That's why you have notes ahead of time. You don't want to be relying on that screen. What we ultimately want you to use PowerPoint for is we want you to use it as a presentation device. I like to think of it as your backup singers. It's there to enhance what it is you have to say. So it's there primarily as a visual way to convey your oral message. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I've got these 5 principles from a book that was written all about working on PowerPoint. And what's neat about this particular book is the author actually wrote the entire book on PowerPoint. And so it's a very visual book. This author talks about there are 5 principles that you should think about when it comes to setting up your slides. And some of these we've already talked about in the chat. Someone has already mentioned the keeping it simple rule, right? But we're going to talk about why it's so important to highlight what's important, picking those right tools, and getting to that point, right? While telling the truth in a way that backs up what it is you have to say. So I'm going to tell you right now to not read this. But as I'm telling you this, you're not listening to me because you're actually reading this, aren't you? Because we're visual animals. As soon as we see something on a screen, we're going to want to read it. There's nothing important, I'll tell you right now, on those slides right now. And the reason why you want to avoid doing this, in addition to it being a mistake of how you set up your argument, your audience won't actually hear what you will say if you set up your slides like this. Because what happens is when you read a slide, reading is a verbal activity. So as you're reading it, for most of us, we're reading it in our head. And so as I'm reading this text, I'm not actually listening to the person who's giving me this presentation because I'm reading the points on the slide. And so it doesn't matter how brilliant you are describing these points on the slide, your audience won't actually hear you. So you want to have the general rule people go for is you want to have anywhere between 5 to 7 seconds for your audience to look at your slide and then look at you. And if it takes any longer than that, then you're going to want to stagger putting up the slide on the screen, or better yet, not use that text. Because again, you don't want to avoid that slidegement that we talked about before, where people just put big chunks of text, because it doesn't actually help when it comes to what it is you have to say. See, Eileen zoned out because they're busy reading, right? You don't want to do it. You don't want your audience to zone out. You don't want to give your audience permission to stop listening to what you have to say. So what's the solution then? If we don't want to have a data dump, well, then we want to use bullets. Okay, you want to use those bullets. And those bullets are meant to, again, guide your audience and to guide you in how you're setting up your argument. It helps you to keep your information succinct. It helps if you have that level of consistency. And then your job is to give them that bullet and then lead right away to the argument, okay? So if you do need to use text, you want to make sure that you are very strategic with what text you do decide to use, because oftentimes people use way too much text, way too much text. I read a stat once that said up to 30 million PowerPoint presentations are made every single day. I guarantee you probably 29.5 million of those are not good PowerPoint presentations. You want to make sure yours is one of the good ones. And to make it a good presentation means you want to be strategic with the text that you decide to use. And chances are you're probably using too much text. So be strategic. Okay. Another way that you'll want to use PowerPoint will be choosing the right visual. So this is a really good website. I found some really good tips on this website, so you might want to check that out. You can click on that link to find out more information. But what I liked about this website is they showed a comparison of information that you would use in a paper might not work so well for a slide. So for example, in a paper, you might have a table like this, where you have numbers written out according to certain qualifications, right? So you can see group A. Yes, for sure. I'll put that link in the chat. For sure, I will. So you see group A is corresponding to these different quarters, right? Now, in a presentation like this, you could put this up on the slide And you could take the time to carefully explain it using your laser pointer, or you could find a different way to convey this information. What if you were to instead use something like this instead? So notice here, you'll see that by choosing to use it as a bar graph versus a table, right away you're able to quickly see the difference between and be able to highlight what's important for your audience to see. Now, I could take the time to show that group A, if I were to explain that top line of my table, but it's not nearly as dramatic as changing my information slightly, okay? Thanks, Merle. I think Merle put the links in the chat, okay? So it's up to you to figure out what's the best way for me to take this information. The information you put in your paper might not be the best information and the best way to convey that information when it comes to conveying it on your slide. So that's up to you to determine that, okay? Now, the last bit of my talk here, I just wanted to spend just a couple of minutes giving you some advice and some tips on presentations themselves, because that usually is, in addition to the prep work of setting up your PowerPoint slides, then you've got the challenge of actually presenting that information in front of an audience. So I wanted to give you some delivery tips in addition to setting up your argument on PowerPoint. The first tip I will give you is the most important tip, and that is practicing. The more practice you give yourself, the more confidence you're going to have when it comes to giving your information in front of your audience. So give yourself that time to practice. And I don't mean just practicing in your head. I don't know about you, but I know for myself, when I think about something in my head, I'm much more brilliant up here than I am when I speak it out loud. And so practicing out loud is important, because practicing out loud, you become more comfortable with the timing of it. You become more comfortable with how it feels coming out of your mouth, and you just become more confident. So I would encourage all of you to practice it out loud. If you can practice in front of somebody, practice in front of somebody. If you can practice with the technology, practice with your technology. The more practice you can do, the better, okay? One thing I will recommend is to practice with an outline and to not write out your speech at all. Writing out your speech, reading out your slides, super boring. But knowing those main points you want to make and expressing them in a way that's compelling to your audience is a way to connect to them. So I would encourage you not to write out your speech as well, and to use an outline. Now, there's two parts to delivery. There is how you look and how you sound. And so a lot of what you all wrote in that what not to do and what to do exercise we did at the beginning of this talk boils down to visual and vocal delivery. So in terms of how you look, there are certain things you want to think about. You'll want to think about the appropriateness of the occasion. So what do I need to wear? What's the appropriate attire for me in terms of how I'm coming across? How am I going to stand? Am I going to be sitting? Am I going to be standing? How are you using your hands? How are you using movements? How are you using gesture? Things like that. All of that's going to be important in terms of how you relate to your audience. You want to show energy with how you use your body, but you also want to use energy with how you use your voice. So you'll want to think about your vocal delivery, and you want to make sure you sound as confident as possible. And you'll sound confident because of the practice that you've had and the level of preparation you've put into your presentation. So you want to find a way to show your audience that I have a message that's important for you to hear, and here it is. Here's my number one tip that I tell my students that I hope that you remember. If you forget everything else about my talk today, I hope you remember this. The audience is on your side. The audience ultimately wants to see you do well. I don't care where you're speaking, whether it's in a class, whether it's in a job interview, whether it's asking someone out on a date. Ultimately, your audience is on your side. They want to see you succeed. No one wants to see you fail. And so if you tell yourself that, you're going to have a little bit more confidence, because then you tell yourself your audience is here to hear what I have to say. They're not here to judge me. They're here to be on my side, because we know what it feels like. We have that connection. There's a speaker audience connection that's special, right? We want the speaker to do well because we ourselves want to do well whenever we have to give a presentation. So we have that reciprocity that you can hopefully use to help calm down your nerves when you're in a situation where you feel completely overwhelmed. The audience wants to see you do well. So tell us what it is you want to tell us. Use these rhetorical tools to tell us in a way that gets your message across the most effective. So to wrap things up here, I want you to, again, think about those 3 modes of appeal. Even if you forget the Greek words, think about how do you set up your argument? How do you connect to the audience? How do you establish credibility? All 3 of those are always going to be at work, no matter what kind of presentation you have to give. You want to find ways to involve your audience, right? Thinking about what it is they have to, what they is they want to hear. That's going to guide what they have to know versus what's nice to know, the need to know versus nice to know. And then finally, practicing. Practicing really goes such a long way. The more you practice, the more confident you feel in yourself, and the more you feel prepared for what's ahead of you. So I know that we have lots of great places on campus. I know Merle is a great advocate for you all. She has so many great programs set in place for so many of undergraduate programs across campus. We've got a great writing center. We've got lots of different resources here for you to take advantage of so that you feel ready and prepared for whatever is ahead of you. So that's all I had to say. I hope that you got something useful out of this, even if it's just to know that you aren't alone in this process and that there are resources available to you and that you can do this. Ultimately, being a good speaker, some people are born good public speakers, but to be honest, most of us aren't born good public speakers. Most of us learn how to be good speakers, and we learn by practice. We learn by taking the time to set up our argument, thinking about who's going to be hearing what it is we have to say, and then having the confidence to be able to say what needs to be said. Any questions?
That was a fantastic presentation, Rebekah. I really appreciate that. I want to let everyone know I'm going to stop the recording for now, just because then that leaves everything open. Anyone can ask any questions that they might have or make any comments and get some feedback from Rebekah. So thank you, Rebekah. So hand clap for everybody. Thank you for being with us today, and I will stop the recording.